Donald Trump draws a pretty unfortunate judge. Her name is Judge Tanya S. Chutkan. Some people on the internet on the left are calling her the J6 Punisher. Why? Because evidently she has granted harsher sentences than even the Justice Department was asking for. So in a case, the defense says, hi, we want the minimum. The Justice Department says, we want the maximum. Judge Tanya S. came out and said, you know what? We're going to give you more than the maximum. Not good. And this is taking place out of DC. MSNBC is going nuts about it. This guy's very excited. He talks in a lot of platitudes. Kind of a weird little dance I think they do on this channel that we'll take a look at. We got official statements now from the special counsel, Jack Smith. Here is what he said with his kind of disheveled hair walking on out after the indictment was announced, telling America why this needed to happen.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued.
I didn't hear seditious conspiracy in there, and I didn't hear insurrection, which is strange because the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers both got convicted of seditious conspiracy. And the Justice Department that was prosecuting them was not the special counsel. And so the lunatic prosecutors in Merrick Garland's office thought that there was enough probable cause there to go charge a ton of people with seditious conspiracy. But he didn't charge Trump with that. So who's off on this? Now, of course, there's the possibility that the seditious conspiracy charges come at a later date via a superseding indictment, but they're not here right now. And if the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were going to overtake the country, their leader was therefore Donald Trump. And if this guy doesn't find that there's enough probable cause for Trump to be the leader of a seditious conspiracy, why are the other Proud Boys and Oath Keepers sitting in custody with the top level charge being seditious conspiracy? Why is Stewart Rhodes, the Oath Keeper, former, going to prison for 18 years for seditious conspiracy and the other charges that he's been charged with? If the special counsel can't even find enough cause to say that the leader is not even at that status. And so it sounds like the independent special counsel has concluded there is no seditious conspiracy. Therefore, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, that top line charge should be dismissed immediately, and they should be brought forward on new trials.
Issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full.
We did.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people.
That was all led by Trump, so you're going to charge him with seditious conspiracy or what?
They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
All right, very bland statement. He looks a little bit rough there. You know, if you put him in a lineup like with Hunter, you know, if there was a 911 call and somebody called and says that they heard a hooker being beaten in a motel and they put pictures of Hunter and Jack Smith together, they'd be pretty close, wouldn't they? They'd be pretty close. You'd be like, I could have been one of the two of them. I'm not real sure. But the point here, aside from that he looks like, you know, typical schleb prosecutor, he is not giving us much new here other than just saying he's very upset about January 6th. Now, when we read through the indictment in full yesterday, we were a little bit confused about what the actual criminal conduct was because it was a big, long screed about Arizona, Michigan, and all Georgia, all the other states. But what was the conduct? We know that if you get charged with the DUI, it's pretty easy. You've got the elements of the law, actual physical control of motor vehicle, blood alcohol content over the statutory limit, impaired to the slightest degree, all the things. And you just go down the list. Okay, when did it happen? What was the specific conduct? Okay, it was this call. It was this credit card transaction. I shouldn't have fraudulently done that. I shouldn't have left the point of sale and walked out the door. We know, but what was the conduct here? It was a bunch of phone calls, and some of them seemed worse than others, and Mike Pence had his notes taken in, and okay, what is it? Because if it is that broad, well, then that's a big problem for them, because my goodness, we could charge anybody on that basis. I mean, if the law is stretched out so wide that you could drive a truck through it, that's not a real solid case, unless they're not really interested in justice. They just want to throw charges and get something to stick. Now, Merrick Garland, who runs the DOJ, who is also an individual who doesn't talk at all, comes out and just drops on the curb a 45-second statement. Here he is.
January 6th, attack on our democracy. The career men and women of the Justice Department engaged in what has become the largest investigation in our history.
The largest investigation in United States history is this. Now, I have to always pause when they say this type of garbage and just remind us that it is absolute nonsense. Okay, there have been just over 1,000 people who have been charged out of January 6th. Look at a Super Bowl when it comes through your town and the number of criminal charges that will pop up. It's more than 1,000. Okay, so 1,000 charges, and half of those have already been resolved by plea deals, and the other half of those, or half of the remainder, are nonviolent, right? They're pretty benign types of charges, and they're just still gobbling people up. So it is a joke. If this is the biggest criminal investigation of our Department of Justice, they should be embarrassed, because it's like a joke. They have thousands of employees, thousands of lawyers all over this country, and this was it? So just think about it, right? If you have 1,000 cases that have been charged, how many lawyers are assigned on this case, on these cases? What do you think? It's 100? So it's 100 lawyers, probably, maybe. So that means 100 lawyers have 10 cases each. That's like nuts, right? Any lawyer would tell you that's what they've got 10 cases. Is this a joke? So if they have more than 100 lawyers, which I would imagine they do, 100 licensed people working on 1,000 cases, it might be one lawyer to one case. I don't know what the official numbers are, because they haven't officially told us, but it is a joke. The numbers are, they just don't add up, but they keep saying this.
In November last, I appointed Jack Smith, a special counsel, to take on the ongoing investigation in order to underline the department's commitment to accountability and independence. Mr. Smith and his team of experienced, principled career agents and prosecutors have followed the facts and the law wherever they lead. Any questions about this matter will have to be answered by the filings made in the court.
Are you concerned about this affecting
I think he basically just says that every morning he wakes up. It's just the thing that he says. It's not even that different from what he says any other time. So that is Merrick Garland and Jack Smith giving us the update. Now let's learn a little bit more about this judge, Judge Tanya S. Chutkan. The AP gave us a little bit of an update on this. They said that the judge assigned randomly to Trump's January 6th case is a tough punisher of the Capitol rioters. You're kidding! Isn't that convenient? She has stood out as one of the toughest, in fact, one of the toughest punishers of rioters who stormed the Capitol in an attack fueled by Trump's baseless claims of a stolen election. She's also ruled against Trump before. Her name is Judge Tanya Chutkan, former assistant public defender who was nominated to the bench by Obama. She's going to oversee the case accusing Trump of trying to overturn 2020. Chutkan has handed down prison sentences in riot cases, look, that are harsher than DOJ prosecutors even recommended. She's also ruled against Trump in another January 6th case. She refused to block the release of documents that the January 6th committee was trying to get by saying that Trump had executive privilege. So Trump says, you don't get my documents because I'm the president or the former president and I have executive privilege. Trump, judge, you certainly recognize that, don't you? She says no, waives it, violates it. The other judges have violated attorney-client privilege. And so now she basically cracks the shell that enables the DOJ to go conduct their prosecution, and then they just bring it right back into her court. She's like, oh, perfect. I gave you exactly what you needed. Bring it on back to me. They did. Now you see, it says she rejected Trump's argument arguments that he could hold privilege over his documents when he was in post-presidency. Biden cleared the way for the National Archives to turn the papers over. She said that Trump couldn't claim that his privilege exists in perpetuity. She said presidents are not kings and Trump is not president. Trump will make his first court appearance on Thursday before the judge. This is going to be in front of a different judge, and we learned how to pronounce the name Makshila Upadhyay. I think that's probably not right, but we tried. Such judges handle initial matters in federal cases. You can see this is Judge Chutkan, appointed by Obama. Judge has sentenced at least 38 people convicted of the Capitol riot-related crimes. All 38 went to prison. Wow, 38 of 38 convicted of Capitol riot-related crimes. All of them went to prison. 10 days to 5 years. So this is a January 6th case. How can Trump not go to prison on this? I'm shocked how Trump was not charged with seditious conspiracy on this, and that they're not going to ask for 18 years. It's almost like they've been a bunch of liars and hyperbloviating to us over the last several years. But other people are sitting in jail right now for seditious conspiracy. But Jack Smith didn't think there was enough here to charge Trump, so she just sends everybody to prison because it's an attack on the Capitol. She's one of at least 2 judges out of D.C. who collectively have sentenced nearly 600 defendants. More than 1/3 of them, except hers, avoided sentences that included incarceration. Other judges have typically handed down sentences that are more lenient. Chutkan, however, has matched or exceeded their recommendations in 19 of her 38 sentences. In 4 of those, prosecutors weren't seeking any jail time at all, but she gave them jail. The government says, no, just probation's fine. And she says, no, probation's not fine. This guy's an insurrectionist. Jail for him. Chutkan says prison can be a powerful deterrent against the threat of another insurrection. Seems like she's already presumed that that's been proven. She said in December, every day we're hearing about reports of anti-democratic factions of people plotting violence. The potential threat of violence in 2024. Oh, great. This is concerning. Now, I have a hard time believing that she keeps Trump in custody or does anything like that because it would just be lunacy. But it will illustrate the massive double standard that exists here. If she doesn't hold Trump in custody, but everybody else she held in custody, isn't that going to kind of expose her massive hypocrisy or her double standard that she's giving Trump a benefit of the doubt? My point is, Trump, of course, should not be held in custody, and neither should the other seditious conspirators who were never involved in any seditious conspiracy whatsoever. So if there's a silver lining in this prosecution, it is going to be that it exposes the absolute absurdity of all of their charges and allegations to this point. They've been telling us that these were seditious conspirators. Well, where's the seditious conspirator charge for Trump? So is she going to do this same thing? I mean, if this is such a dangerous insurrection, is she going to hold Trump in custody? She sure talks a big game about this, the potential threat of violence in 2024. Well, now the biggest threat, according to these people, is going to be in her courtroom. What's she going to do about it? She said in December, before sentencing a Florida man to more than 5 years. At the time, that sentence was the longest for a January 6th case, 5 years. She said it had to be made clear that trying to violently overthrow the government, trying to stop the peaceful transition of power, and assaulting law enforcement officers is going to be met with absolute certain punishment. Trevor McFadden, a Trump nominee, suggested that she was being too hard on those people compared to other people like who got arrested during George Floyd's Summer of Love. Chutkan criticized him, said people gathered all over the country during the Summer of Love to protest the violent murder by unarmed police officers. Oh gosh. Some of those protesters became violent, she said. That's almost literally. Just change that around. People gathered all over the country last year to protest the stolen election by a group of political thugs. Some of those protesters became violent. Same thing. But her side gets an excuse. The other side doesn't. But to compare the actions of people protesting mostly peacefully to a violent mob to overthrow the country ignores the very real danger. All right. So we now know that Trump is going to be appearing on Thursday before a magistrate judge, not that judge. So magistrate judge, I'm going to guess, is not going to hold him in custody because that would be nuts thing to do. And then Judge Chutkan's not going to have to make that decision. But it does beg the question, if the lead insurrectionist that these people have been screaming at us about all this time is going to walk out of custody, why are the others being held? MSNBC has been celebrating this. These people are just gleeful with almost this bloodlust. And I wanted to share this very interesting little performance from this fella. And I think he probably worked hard on this. You see this giant stack of papers here, reading this, memorizing this. Rachel Maddow has that pinched lip look, like she's very somber as well. You know, sometimes I know here we can get a little bit platitude-y and sometimes start talking in a very fluffy language, but this is like a 10 for 10 on that. He brings up Lincoln and all sorts of stuff. I don't even really know what he's talking about, but here it is.
Well, my first reaction, which is just a personal one, and having covered this, I think, like all of us have, and many of the viewers are in the weeds of it too, is like, right, yes, I'm not crazy.
You are, yeah, you are.
If this wasn't a crime, nothing is a crime. We watched him do it on television. We sat at this desk a year ago at the January 6th committee. We knew what he was doing. If that is not a crime, then nothing is a crime. That part of it is just like, I find really important and gratifying. I mean, there's a kind of ballast to it.
Ballast?
Yes, of course, this was corrupt. Of course, this was fraud.
Yeah, he's feeling very ballast. He's got a ballast feeling somewhere in his body. He's like stabilized now because this indictment is finally hit. And he thought he was crazy for all of these years. Now he's not that crazy. Now, I think he is still a little bit crazy because I think this entire panel up here has been screaming at us that this guy was a seditious conspirator, but he has not been charged with seditious conspiracy. Like, do they feel like total losers? I mean, they were telling us that all this was going to happen and then it didn't happen. Does Jack Smith feel like a failure? Why aren't these people calling him out for not delivering their prime charge?
Yes, of course, this was corrupt. Of course, this was fraud. Of course, it was a conspiracy to defraud the U.S. We all saw him engage in the conspiracy to defraud the U.S.
Yeah.
The second thought I had is just about the magnitude of this moment, which I think is just worth taking a second on.
Please, floor is yours.
With Donald Trump, lots of things are unprecedented. The first time he was indicted was unprecedented, and the second time he was indicted was unprecedented because of the federal indictment had never come down.
Yeah, and the third time's unprecedented, and the fourth time's going to be unprecedented, and the first superseding indictment was unprecedented, and the second superseding indictment is going to be unprecedented, meaning it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's all kind of been made to be irrelevant because you just keep going back to the well.
This is in canon of American events, January 6th and its aftermath. And the reason is that for 159 years after the cannons fire in Fort Sumter, there is an unbroken chain of peaceful transfer of power. Yeah. And not only that, the core story of the American experiment is a fight within itself to be true to the radical promise of democracy.
Rile it up.
That is why Lincoln says at the battlefield at Gettysburg that the question before the nation is whether a nation of, by, and for the people can long endure. It is a test whether the thing can last.
Yes, louder.
And that's in a category of itself in American history, the Civil War and the death and misery. But this is the gravest political crime since secession. Wow. And the gravest test that Lincoln called on the battlefield at Gettysburg of whether a nation of, by, and for the people, that we are our own masters, whether that can long endure. So I feel profoundly gratified by reading this document because it calls the question in a way that it has not quite been called yet.
Yeah, we can tell. You're also very gratified over there. You've been waiting for this day to come, and I'm a little bit concerned that it's not exactly what you were hoping for. I mean, you've all been saying it was going to be insurrection, sedition. None of those charges made it to the top line, so I don't know what you're so excited about. To me, it seems like a total failure, and the charges are a total mismatch of basically a ranting screed from a prosecutor, almost like this whole thing was written by Liz Cheney or something. So it's more of the same, more political prosecution. We're going to be landing in front of the same judge who looks at the BLM riots and says those were okay because they were favored, but this is a disfavored defendant. And Judge Tanya Chutkan will get this case soon. We'll continue to cover, my friends. Thank you for subscribing wherever it is you're watching this as we continue to cover.